Hello and welcome to the second session in our series on Viva, Copilot, and the new modern Microsoft employee experience. In this session, we're going to be building on what we talked about last time around the employee communication and employee connection and engagement journey. And we're going to be talking about how the employee learning and employee development journey is changing with Copilot and AI. My name is Richard Harbridge. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of a company called Tutorlead, a Microsoft MVP, and super friendly. So if you have questions after, please definitely reach out. And then I'm joined by James and Jamie. If you guys want to do a bit of introduction, that'd be great.
Go ahead, James.
I like to do this every time, so you guys don't.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't say James and Jamie, so I'll let you go first.
All right, so hey everybody, my name is James Wood. I am a technical specialist for modern work here at Microsoft. So definitely happy to help our customers throughout the entire Microsoft 365 stack, which includes all of the Viva modules, Teams, Copilot, everything like that. So I'll hand it over to Jamie.
And hi, everybody. I'm Jamie, also a Modern Workplace Technical Specialist aligned to all of my Canada customers. So really excited to be here with you today. I do cover everything Microsoft 365, Viva, and Copilot for Microsoft 365. Lots of other things, but I'm really happy to be here today as well.
Awesome. And, with that, I think we can get into some learning about employee learning. This is going to be an exciting topic. And to kind of kick us off, I think, Jamie, maybe you're going to do a bit of an introduction on some of the statistics and what's been going on from a Microsoft viewpoint.
Yes, yeah. So, before we jump into a lot of these topics, I think it's important we typically are setting the stage, right? Statistics are definitely something we're going to talk about, but just kind of where we are today in regards to AI and generative AI and the impact it's having on learning and development is going to be a bit of our focus today, right? And so throughout this series, we've been touching on employee experience and things like Copilot in Viva. But I think talking about where our understanding of this comes from is really important. And so I think taking it back to kind of the worth it equation, it helps us to understand how people are starting to engage with technology and tools in the workplace. And so essentially, over the last few years, people have really begun to ask themselves, why am I coming to work? Is the effort I'm putting in here something that is giving me development and fulfillment? And is it worth the effort that I'm making while I'm here, right? So it's like the cost of my time spent coming back to me and something that I want to contribute to, especially as the demand on our work increases and increases, right? So the concept that we keep talking about in terms of digital debt, right? So the more information that's out there that we now have to contend with, a deeper digital space that we now have to contribute to and work with. And so how we're approaching and understanding technology and our employee workforce, and also our position as consumers too, and how that consumer technology is coming into these workplace tools is really important. And so Microsoft has essentially really committed to trying to research that, understand what that looks like, across industries, both within Microsoft, right? So we have a lot of our own learning, and I believe I mentioned that yesterday, and you'll see that throughout this series as well, how much we're learning about how we engage with these tools, but also, again, working with other research organizations, lots of different schools of study, and even financial studies as well. But what I want to focus on are some of the learns that we've taken from reports like the Work Trend Index that we've done. And so we've started to essentially get a picture of, or started to ask, employees out there, again, across industries, across organizations in the world, what is it that is challenging in your workforce and what is it that is working for you, right? And so some of the things that people are saying when it comes to learning and development are actually that they feel that they would love to have deeper development in their workforce, right? So things like being committed to having leadership that is committed to their own career development as well as skill development. This is really important to them. And you can see on the statistic here, 76% of employees would stay longer at their company if they really felt that was important. And that's, again, because not everybody is necessarily equipped to like upskill and or to be given the time or know how to navigate. And so it's really the role of the organizations to think about this, right? Start asking yourself these questions. What are we doing to strategize to make sure that people have the right tools and that we actually have a way to, again, keep the employee at the center of that equation so that as we grow with technology and develop, that regardless of those developments and regardless of how what technology we implement, we're always able to adapt because we're having that same focus and energy towards making this easy, accessible, and something where the effort will keep retention of those employees long term and will help them join you in that journey instead of it being sort of a war of we have a vision for this, but maybe the employee is going a different way. And some of the additional statistics that we learned are essentially more of this research kind of told us that despite employees really wanting to learn more, they're not getting that, right? So they're not getting that attention. We have actual tangibles saying that, they're not getting that focus time where their leadership is saying, hey, we are carving out space for you to learn. We're also creating a space for you to connect with mentors or to discover career development, and also the tools with which they're given to do skill development, things across, like I said, skill development for the tools we need to accomplish our work, but also tools that we need to do things like compliance training, necessary things that we have to do in the business in addition to as a role function, right? And so there's been a lot of pushback from employees. And so we really know, again, what's working is by putting that energy into creating that space. What's not working is how unsuccessfully people are doing that, and we know exactly how to tackle that challenge. And so what we'll spend today doing is essentially walking through how Microsoft is sort of bringing together those tools and taking a lot of that research and learning and now trying to solve and amplify what's working and solve some of the challenges that we've seen. So what I'm going to do is pass it over to Richard to sort of cover the recipes for success, essentially, and how to accomplish this. Oh, Richard, you're muted.
And it's funny, the thing that I think of whenever I hear that is, no one leaves an organization because the compliance training over there is better than the compliance training over here. Like, oh, that's going to be, you leave because of the way we learn, right? And so absolutely, I think those statistics and that framing is really important. So I just want to put a little bit in perspective. We're talking about employee development, which is, an ongoing thing that we do. We develop our employees, we support them through that life cycle. And often it's hand in hand with performance, improving alignment, execution, productivity. It's about engagement, making sure they have a voice, that they feel heard, that they feel seen, that they also are active and engaged by the organization and supported in the different ways they need. And these things need to be done together. So one of the other things that I think is really important, both on the data side as well as how we approach this, is we need to look at this more holistically. It's not about like having an employee development roadmap. It's about having an employee experience roadmap and then having, different stages of the employee experience represented, right, with improvements and optimizations over time, especially with AI and how it affects each of these stages, right? AI is affecting attracting talent. It's affecting the recruitment and hiring process. It's certainly affecting onboarding in very significant ways. It's affecting, of course, development, but also employee engagement, which we talked about yesterday, and employee performance, which we'll talk about next week. So there's a lot of different areas to think about here. And I wanted to highlight specifically this re-onboarding because we have found a lot of organizations, as AI is both disrupting types of work and just in general, as people have shifted to digital work with hybrid and the change that we've had with this digital first response during the pandemic, we are seeing a lot of organizations almost re-onboarding their staff to help them understand, what their new roles, responsibilities, and capabilities are, along with tools and changes that have happened within the organization that might make them more effective. And so I think that re-onboarding is a really good thing to connect with this learning discussion as well. And this will make sense as we start to go through some scenarios. The next thing I wanted to highlight is, as I mentioned, people don't leave an organization for compliance training to be better somewhere else. They leave it because of the way people learn. Most people, and there's lots of different studies. This particular study I've always liked. There's many studies like this that essentially explain that people learn from peers. They don't learn from managers, and they don't typically really learn from from IT and people outside of their group of circle of trust. And so where people go to when they have a question or they're trying to figure something out is not a manager, because they don't want, someday I might work for that person, or someday, that could have influenced this. So they go to a peer, someone at their level, and they say, hey, how do you do X and how do you tackle Y? And because that peer-to-peer learning is such a key instrument within organizations, what we find is most organizations, when we look at their learning management strategy, it's very brittle. It's very top-down. It takes a long time. It's like capital L learning. It takes a while to create learning and add it to the cycle. And because of that, it really inhibits this peer-to-peer based learning, and quite frankly, where almost all the learning actually occurs in the organization. Now, this is even more important when you have exponential changes. AI is an exponential change. It's not a linear one, which means it's very disruptive. And so it's something that requires a lot of adaptation. It requires us to learn new digital fitness regimes and things like that. And those learning pathways are absolutely team-based, right? It's based on peers and people you work with, and it can't really be top-down as well. So again, you can enable transformation in those scenarios, but it's really important to facilitate that. And I think that's really at the heart of what Viva Learning represents today, because if you were to take a really simple click through and talk through Viva Learning, you essentially have this way in where you're talking with another individual. Like here, I'm talking with Alex, and I can say, Alex, I think this content, because I know you ask me for Java development support all the time. I think you'd really find this useful because it'll help us develop more skills across our team. And that reduces the reliance on me and so on and so forth. So that's how we learn, right? Someone else says, oh, I'm really good at X, and we learn from them, but sometimes they're also like, hey, you should actually go try this training or do this thing. And so when they introduce, this individual to that training, they can go take that. And then more importantly, that individual who recommended that training can actually see, did they complete it? Not because they are an official capital L learning, commissioner, and they're providing learning assets and things like that, but because they want to know if they completed it so they can follow up, so they can have a dialogue, so that they can support each other. And this peer-based learning modeling that is so intrinsic in the design of Viva Learning is why the employee experience needs to have a really integrated learning piece. It needs to be where people are and the tools that they're already using, so it's very frictionless to be able to do these things. And two, it needs to be very social and shareable from the very beginning. And you'll see some more examples of that. This also leads us to discussion of what the challenges are. So we've done a lot of Viva Learning pilots and even large-scale implementations with the customers. And what we find is it's not so much the Viva Learning or the employee experience changes that are hard, and we'll talk about this more at the end, but it's this change in how you work, right? How you approach learning. If you can't quickly create lowercase l learning and add it to your learning repositories and have peer-based or employee-contributed learning, you're behind the curve, right? You're going to really struggle with being a resilient and agile organization. That's not to say that learning is the same official status, it's the same requirement. There is compliance learning. There's still very particular things that you're going to do officially as an organization, but you need to have this pathway alongside it. And those scenarios that Viva Learning enables are actually ones that often organizations are missing. They're gaps within their learning strategy. And so these are some examples of that, for reference. And so with that, I think I'll pass it back because I know you guys want to talk about the Viva portfolio as it kind of correlates to some of these initiatives.
James, you're on mute.
Yeah, all right, thank you. So, we can see here that Viva offers quite a few different modules, and we generally break them down into these three different pillars. So, to drive mission and engagement, to enable agile performance in the workforce, and to measure engagement and productivity. And so what's really great is that Viva works in Teams and Microsoft 365. So, it's easily customizable, it's extensible, and it integrates with the tools and the organizations that the organizations already use. We also have a great partner ecosystem that really consists of technology partners across all of our commonly used platforms like HR, well-being, or our learning management systems, which we'll get into today. And while built on the M365 platform, our customers benefit from that common platform service to unify every application into kind of that cohesive solution while providing a comprehensive approach to privacy and security. And so today, see, we're actually going to focus on primarily on Viva Learning. And so if you missed the session yesterday, we focused on Engage and Amplify. And then we have some more sessions coming up tomorrow and next week as well to cover the rest of the Viva modules. But today, learning is where we're going to put our focus. And we're also going to talk about how Microsoft Copilot is going to work across the Viva applications as well. So first, we have new Copilot features that'll be available directly across all of the Microsoft Viva applications. Some of these features are already there. Some are going to be rolling out soon. And second, there's data and intelligence from Viva apps that will be integrated directly into Microsoft Copilot chat experience. So that's going to be awesome. And lastly, we have the new Copilot dashboard powered by Viva Insights, so that if you are using M365 Copilot, you can get tons of information about your AI readiness, adoption, and usage for your current Copilot users. So that's something to check out as well. And then just a little bit, so like I mentioned, we have Copilot coming out across all of our Viva modules and applications. And so you can see here that Viva is coming out across Goals, Engage, Glint, Insights, and we'll get into those. But like I mentioned, today we're primarily going to be focusing on Viva Learning. And so really Copilot in Viva Learning can help you easily create structured learning collections, find the right resource and summarize learning content. So you can find the courses or the content that you want and put them into collections and consume that content faster and easier than ever before using the AI and Copilot.
And just before we move on from this, I do want to highlight one thing that comes up a lot. There is sort of two versions of Viva Learning, right? There's the seeded kind of free version of Viva Learning, and then there's the premium capability. Well, today we'll probably focus a lot more on the premium capabilities because that's where Copilot's included. It is worth understanding that in my previous example of like this gap that exists, the free version of Viva Learning actually fits that gap really well. So keep in mind, regardless of your own pathways and where you are in your own journey around Viva Learning, it's something that a lot more organizations should be using at scale in the free version so that they can mature in their usage towards these more premium scenarios. So I just wanted to at least highlight that, both the inclusion of Copilot in the Viva licensing, as well as this, Copilot for Viva in the Viva licensing, as well as that there is a free version, because I know we won't be planning to talk too deeply about the free. Most of the stuff we're talking about is more the premium scenarios.
Cool. And then, yeah, just so with AI, so many doors have been unlocked that allow us to really have easy access to so much content and information that we've never had access to before. But what this means is that companies are really going to have to, adapt the way that their employees find and consume the content to be able to get the most out of it. And so that's going to it's a challenge, but we have the tools in place to help companies make that happen. And I think having said that, now would be a good time to pass it back over to Jamie to kind of start going through the demo portion of the webinar.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think throughout all this learning discussion, I love that we've touched on a couple of things. One is the technology. One is like kind of the need to know or need to do for the business. But what I love, Richard, about part of what you said as well is the importance of people being such a significant resource, right? That peer sharing, not just for like peer-to-peer accountability, but how can we utilize the signals and information that we can collect with our tools to sort of proactively access some of those more intangible aspects of our own learning and development, right? So that leads me to talk about something like Skills in Viva. And essentially, Skills in Viva is an AI-powered service that we've developed where we want to be able to help you track all of your different sort of key job skills. We really want to be able to also, provide that information to others within your organization to create this connectivity and transparency, and then to take that additional step and also give that visibility to leadership as well. So how can we capitalize on the skills that our workforce has? And so some of the Skills in Viva, I should mention, is currently in private preview, and it will really be integrated across experiences throughout Microsoft 365, which you'll get to see a little bit of today. But it also, of course, particularly in the Viva suite, and you'll see that in the learning portion, Viva learning portion that James will go through as well. But just at a high level, some of the things that Skills in Viva is going to be doing is bringing you things like predictive skill suggestions. right? So being able to tap into things like the Microsoft Graph and even our LinkedIn skills graph. So, Microsoft is heavily, we acquired LinkedIn, so maintain a bunch of investments in continuing to develop that. And so if you've ever seen anyone updating their LinkedIn page and you've got that huge skills repository to say, hey, these are some of the things that I've developed in my role at these various stages, we wanted to tap into that huge repository and say, hey, how can we bring that in, right? We're tying that work experience right into how you interact in your day-to-day workforce. So that's one really great bit of value there. Like I said, additional insights for leadership, integration right into the flow of your work, and then assisting in that development and upskilling. So I'm going to walk you through just a few slides to take a look at both of those angles, and then we'll transition to James. So what you'll see in this slide, let me make sure it's playing here for a little bit. So what you'll see here is I'm, interacting with my team. I just go into Teams and I'm in a chat. And I'm going to repeat the term in the flow of work as something that you'll see throughout all of our different Viva modules. That's kind of our favorite phrase, the word the equation, in the flow of work. And then, of course, Copilot everywhere. But with skills in Viva, what I'll notice is, I'm working with Cameron here, and I may not have spoken to Cameron before. This may be a new person I'm connecting with internally. So I may be unfamiliar with, what his skill levels are or where he's actually an expert in the organization. And these could be things that are associated with his role and position. But what I really love is that it also allows us to see things that he may have skills in that aren't necessarily aligned to his role function, but he can be a valuable, knowledgeable resource about. I definitely can speak to that myself. And I think we all know someone in the business who's, maybe you've got that HR person hanging around, but they're really great at Excel and, they're a people person, but who knew that they can, crush some workbooks and write some macros. Who knows what people have skills in, right? So being able to write in Teams, open up that profile card, and that's what you're seeing here, is essentially see things like, there's all that contact information. That's wonderful. But as you scroll a little bit, see in the middle there, I see that list of initial skills, right? Leadership, team management, these are all fantastic things. Even further down, you start to see things like what, if I wanted to expand, what additional skills I have or that person has, and then taking it further, what other goals they may be aligned to in the organization, showing how they're actually contributing to our overarching goals and objectives as an organization, right? And so I think this is really wonderful. But even further down, you'll notice that it's not just identifying what I do and what I'm good at and what I'm associated with, but also the other people in my realm. So I think a really great example of why this is beneficial to sort of proactively front load this information is I know that, at least for me, when I go to Teams or I'm going to contact somebody, I so often might find out, oh, hey, that person's out of office, or maybe they're not available for quick responses. But because I'm able to see who they typically collaborate with in that list, I'm able to go, awesome, I know who I can pivot to. And again, people being such a huge resource in terms of peer learning and skilling, this is going to be really beneficial. So again, we're building that right into the systems. And again, it's right in the places you're already familiar with. So it's not about learning something new just to be better at learning. We want to give you that information up front. And then I really want to take a little bit of a shift to show how much we can take a benefit from this in our, like I said, leadership and management space, right? How, as an organization, can we now say, I can start to measure these things, or we can start to measure these things at the top, right? And really be able, like I said, to capitalize a bit of this. And so what you're looking at is in Viva Insights, we can now gain some visibility on each of those skills and where they sort of, let's say, reside within our organization, right? So how much of a presence are we seeing of certain skill types in various departments? But to take that even further, we can dive deeper in some of those and actually filter by proficiency, right? So yes, I might know Excel, but is it at a 100, 200, 300, 400 level? To take that even further, sometimes it's not product or tool specific. Maybe I'm really good at teaching. And so you're like, hey, I want to understand how to identify other people internally who love sharing and imparting knowledge on others so that we can maybe create an internal champion program, or who is really great at certain things like knowing accessibility. We want to make sure to build out like an accessibility team. It could be so very different in terms of how you approach this, and the types of skills people can have range for across all types of, let's say, activities and purposes. And so I love that we now have this way to track this and help you not only build out things for your organization, like making data-driven decisions for your business purposes that impact costs and everything, but how can we do this culturally, right? Because learning is such a huge cultural piece too. So that's what I wanted to sort of round out but with that said, I think this is the point where maybe there's one more to drive this a little further. Where I'll pass it off to James here to go over how Viva Learning can sort of take that further and give you all that platform for learning as well.
Cool. Thanks, Jamie. So what I want to do now is just kind of take you through a workflow of how somebody could use Viva Learning in their day-to-day application, like within their job. So we can see that we can see here that we're already in the Teams app. So, we're not leaving the application that we're already in order to access Viva Learning, which is awesome. And so here we're looking at that Viva Learning in Teams from the view of an employee. And I can see that the homepage has a set of featured content as well as some of the saved skills that we've already talked about that Jamie had mentioned earlier. And then we can scroll down to the browse section and I can view all the content that's available to my company organized by different providers, length of the courses, or in this case, I can see by the skills that I've selected to learn about. And so I can also see content trending across my organization as well. And so let's say like I've heard signals from the leadership team that they want us to improve our knowledge about, let's say, AI. So I can click edit to update the skills I'm interested in learning about. And from here, I can choose skills that are suggested to me or browse from all the skills that are available in my company's skill library. So if we go ahead and click edit here, we can see that our skills library pop up, and this is just the one that comes out of the box with skills in Viva. And it's actually built on the foundation of that LinkedIn skills graph that Jamie mentioned earlier. And so other companies may choose to use their own skill library or combine their own skills with the LinkedIn skills graph. And so we'll choose artificial intelligence because that's what we want to learn about, which adds that skill to a list of skills that I'm currently interested in or learning about. And when we click save, my Viva Learning homepage now has been updated, and I can see that the intelligent recommendations for courses that are related to skills I've selected, including the AI skill that I've just added. So as we scroll down, we can see that we can browse the courses by skill, and even I just added artificial intelligence, and it's already showing up that I can see that those courses recommended to me in Viva Learning. So if we scroll back up, you can see on the left-hand side that we notice that an assignment is past due. So if we go ahead and click on that card, it'll take us to our My Learning tab. And this is where I'm able to see all of the courses assigned to me with due dates and sources. And so Viva Learning can be connected to your learning management system, which means that assignments created in that platform automatically display here for me. And then it displays the completion progress, and it is written back to your LMS system. And it really makes it easy for me to see all of my learning requirements in one place, and it keeps the system, the record consistent for the HR teams on the back end as well. So if we click into that course that's overdue, it takes me to the details page of the course where I can see all that metadata synced from the host system. So in this case, that system is LinkedIn Learning. And by default, like Richard was talking about the free versus paid version. So by default, LinkedIn Learning, I think 300 courses from LinkedIn Learning are included, all the Microsoft Learn courses. And then if you have any custom content in SharePoint, you can add that in as well. And then when you get into more of the premium versions, you can add content from your other LMS systems and the full LinkedIn Learning experience as well if you have a subscription to that. But like I said, this is from LinkedIn Learning, so you can see the title, the thumbnail, description, author, the duration of the content, and all of that. So if we don't have time to take that course right now, we can actually add it to our calendar to prioritize this learning in the coming days. So we click add to calendar, we can come in, edit this section. And Viva Learning actually automatically suggests meeting times that align to the course duration, and open slots on my Teams and Outlook calendar. And so when I click save, it actually books focus time on my schedule that I can see in my Outlook or Teams calendar. And then my time is saved, it's blocked off so that I have time to complete my learning requirements. So now we'll go back to the My Learning homepage. And if we can see here that we have a few different options here, but if we click on the recommended to you, we can see courses that our maybe manager or our colleagues have recommended to us that they'll think we'll find interesting or beneficial to our role. So if we're focusing on a topic, like right now, my team is focused a lot on Microsoft 365 Copilot. So if my manager sees a course in LinkedIn Learning that could help with that or help us, up our skill level with that, he can recommend a course to us that will then show up in the recommended section of LinkedIn Learning that we can go ahead and complete. And then again, as we keep moving forward, you have a bookmark tab so that you can see courses that you have saved to complete at a later time, or just courses that you want to come back to, that you want to revisit, that you found super interesting, that you really enjoyed. And again, we can go back to the homepage, and let's say we want to think of, this is really where Copilot is going to come into play. So, if we want to think of ways that we want to help my team get a little bit ahead of the curve on the company's AI learning priorities, we can go ahead and ask Copilot for help. And so if we open up that Copilot dialog box, and if you're familiar with Copilot at all, it's a very similar experience across all of the applications. So you click the Copilot button, and then you get your nice chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. So I can open up that Copilot sidebar and start with a basic question about AI fundamentals. So really simple, we can just say, help me find out more about AI fundamentals. Copilot will then pull together content that's aggregated with Viva Learning from my LMS system or other sources like LinkedIn Learning or third-party content connected through the Viva Learning's API framework. And so Copilot also provides a few bullets for me to summarize in the top themes and takeaways that I can then share with my team. So as my team starts to scope out a new AI product, we really want to make sure that we're building it in the right way. So I'd like to specifically learn a little bit more about the risks and ethics around AI. So I can just ask, again, Copilot that type of question. And I think that this content looks great. So I'll ask Copilot to then create a learning collection that I now have this new AI and ethics collection that's been created for me by the Copilot. And so if I click into that collection, it takes me to the details page where I can review and edit the collection. So I can change the courses, edit it, titles, things like that. And I can go ahead and just recommend it to my team. So you can see here that when I click the recommend button, I can populate the recommended bar with something like my worldwide project managers distribution list. And then I can add a short note and a due date, and then I can click recommend. And now this entire learning catalog has been recommended to my team. And it was all kind of pulled together and aggregated by Copilot and the AI. So it makes it really easy for me to be able to source content and share them out with my team without having to go through and individually find courses and see what would be a good fit. Another thing that we can do is, let's say I recently saw a Viva Amplify campaign, and we kind of touched on Viva Amplify yesterday. So if we get messages coming through in, let's say, a Viva Engage channel or Outlook, and it's talking about a new learning academy. So what we can do is we can go and check that out as well. So from the Academies drop-down menu, we can see a couple of other academies available to me. And these are really collections of courses and learning collections that you can go to that are specific to maybe a group of people, a department, a team, a whole sales org, things like that. And so if we go through, we can select that AI Fundamentals Academy. And then from here, we can see, any featured content for this topic. We can scroll down to see a set of associated learning paths as well. So from here, we can see that, under the curated for you part, I've already completed the introduction section. So then we can jump directly over to that AI fundamentals learning path and complete those courses there. And then let's say we see an interesting course on generative AI. I can bookmark it directly here so that I can go back to that bookmark tab in my learning section and find that later for review. And then back on the homepage, I really want to make sure that my skills profile is rounded out with all these new concepts that I'm learning or planning to learn about. So if I click on edit under the home tab under the skills section, this takes me to my individual skills editor view. And so this is my private skills profile that's only visible to me. And then so moving our way down this tab, we can see kind of in the middle here that I have completed the Agile Coach Training Series skills in Viva. And Viva sees that and intelligently nudges me to update my skills profile. I can also see trending skills across the organization as well as suggested skills. And these suggested skills in gray have been inferred from me from signals from the Microsoft Graph. So if I'm doing other learning about different content, working on projects, it knows kind of what I'm doing, what I'm learning about, what I'm interested in, what I've saved, things like that. And so it can suggest skills for me. And then down at the bottom, the skills in blue are skills that I've confirmed. And these will actually show up on my Microsoft 365 profile card, along with the proficiency level that I've set that Jamie kind of touched on earlier. And then I can also see intelligent recommendations from Viva Learning associated with the skills that I'm currently learning. And as we move forward, so we can click on the Excel in Your Role tab, and I'm able to actually see company provided information about my role and the description of skills related to my specific role. So I'm starting to learn more about AI ethics, and I'd like to add that as a skill that I'm developing. And as I click the skill card to open up the options, here I can indicate that this is a confirmed skill I have and what my current proficiency level is. And in this case, it's a skill that I am just starting to learn about. So I can select that I'm a skill that I'm learning as the option. And so when people see that, they'll know that I'm interested in it, I'm working on it, but it's something that I'm actively currently still learning about. And then when we scroll down, we're actually able to identify skill gap opportunities compared to my company's skills and expectations for my role. So you can see here you have your skills compared to all of your company's skill expectations, and it breaks it out by the different skills, kind of where you are versus where other people are in the role and what's expected of you. And all of this information really helps me to understand how to prioritize my time as I look to upskill and grow in my career. So, when you add skills, you get skills recommended to you, you're able to save content. It really helps you to curate what you're looking for, how you want to grow, and what you want to accomplish when you're looking at learning content. And that really should wrap it up for showing you a little bit about how a day-to-day employee experience in Viva Learning could look like. And then you can really see that, oh, sorry, Jamie, go ahead. Sorry, you had your hand up.
No, finish your point.
Thank you.
Wanted to add my own thoughts.
So, and then you can really see that, utilizing the AI tool sets, including Copilot within a learning platform like Viva Learning, really unlocks a lot of potential when it comes to finding and accessing the topics and skills that we want to learn about. So just being able to have that intelligent chatbot that you can use that Copilot, you can source a ton of information and make it really easy to find and curate content. And I think that learning and development are going to become huge, they're already top priorities for companies, but they're going to become easier to access, and employees are going to be really interested in finding courses, being able to learn based on how they can find and access the information now. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, awesome, by the way, a great walkthrough. But this is definitely an area that I'm really passionate about, and I think just in general with our Viva Suite and the employee experience platform, I think I've always, being someone who works at a technology company and have, like I said, been definitely interacting with different folks from students to entrepreneurs who have, they're a single business owner, but the large scale work and their lean on technology is big, or even larger corporations that I work with now. Really seeing the impact of these tools has made me really passionate about some of these things, and also being a consumer myself. So, like, what are the challenges that I've faced, and like how have these tools actually impacted me? And so I can definitely speak to that in terms of what you saw today truly has changed the way that we work. It says so in the reports that you can read, but I think just having these conversations, we have a lot of the same challenges regardless of industry. And so James and I are, obviously our colleagues, but also peers. We cover the same technology. We are very often on that peer-to-peer learning. We're sharing amongst each other. So to speak to the sort of generative AI piece and like the change and shift in learning, like a lot of the new skills that we're developing, we're actually sharing with each other. Just I'm sending him a quick Teams chat, right? Or we're getting on a call and we're saying, hey, have you tried this or tested this? And so having tools that actually encourage that kind of connectivity is wonderful. But to take that even further, things like, because, like I said, we have so much more digital debt, we're so much more in our sort of steeped in this digital space. I definitely dealt with quite a long time having so many meetings in a day that not only was it tough to keep up on tasks, but learning was a huge opportunity for me. Learning, not the issue, but things like getting certain things done that needed to have a check mark, right? And so simple things that we build into the tool, like that scheduling ability, right? So, hey, here's a course that's been assigned to me. And that disparate system issue of not knowing where to go is solved. So that comes right into Viva, and I can now go, great, it's finding that opportunity on my calendar for me. And I just say, great, that chunk is perfect. That's a 60-minute training. It's finding an hour availability on my calendar, and I can go ahead and get that work done. And it's booked, blocked time, right? So saving you the energy of going into Outlook, blocking that time, thinking about so much of what you have to get done versus just having the tools help you make that space, right? In addition to all of that, yeah, Richard.
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in. I think that's exactly it, right? So there's this term in here, and it can kind of be subtle, but accessibility of it, right? So, a lot of times, learning is an extra. It's an extra thing we need to deal with. And, the examples you gave, some of them are free, and you can just use them in Viva Learning.
Yeah.
And then some of the more advanced ones, like how we take this now that people are actually providing information about skills, because it's very natural, it's in the flow of their work, because we're inferring it, because we're removing a lot of the friction, it becomes that much more accessible, and so people share it more.
Mm-hmm.
Or your booking of learning, things like that, as well as just navigating and finding the learning using Copilot and experiences like that. All these things make it, I don't need to learn some interface. I don't need to learn how you organize learning. I can just ask for natural questions to find that content.
Exactly.
And all of those things both increase, of course, adoption, which is what we want, right? Like one of the best metrics for Viva Learning success is, are we seeing an increase in the number of people who are using it for, what do they call it? Non-mandatory learning, right? Elective learning. And if we see that increase, that's a pretty good indicator that, it's doing something that you weren't doing before. And when you combine that, it's like a compounding benefit, right? When you combine that with the fact that now we have richer data, so we can do better workforce planning, we can, adapt and target specific departments or teams and say, like, here's what, we'd like to provide you additional support, or we'd like to drive this, or use that team to mentor other teams. There's so many opportunities now that are made possible because you both have the benefits AI gives you for productivity and analysis and things like that. But again, the accessibility item that you're highlighting, I think, is super key for today's any learning investments. Needs to be about, like, how do we make this easier? With like the little versions, like little snippet videos versus long form videos, like all the typical stuff we can break down in learning patterns, I think fits under that accessibility theme.
Yeah. If I could add one last thing to that too, is like on that same vein, but really like in the function of the tool itself, right? So like Microsoft really not wanting to make a new learning management system, right? The research is telling us, hey, that's not the answer. The answer is solve for the disparate issues and having everything so scattered. And so accessibility, that was the first goal, right? So in the core function of learning, it's saying, hey, we want to bring together all these systems that need to be separate sometimes, right? In terms of like they exist for different reasons. Like I said, we have compliance learning, but also sometimes you've just got departments that have entirely different content provider needs, right? So you've got engineers sometimes who are developing your business apps internally or your consumer facing apps. Then you've got your teams that help the business function, like again, HR, like your information workers, or even frontline workers, right? So you've got this huge difference in skill level, skill need, and knowledge need, et cetera, and even attendance, how you have to provide for that. And bringing it all together. So that's the first answer of accessibility. Then the other piece of that is in the conversations I'm having with a lot of change management and learning management teams with all throughout these organizations is they see Viva Learning and they love it. And they're like, this is great. I love bringing everything together. And it's sort of simple. It's this in the flow form factor. And yet, it's still a lot of information. And so when they see the first page, They go, this is great. But every once in a while, there's feedback saying, this is just a ton of data to look through, even still, regardless. And that's, you just can't help it. So how can we take that further? And I think exactly, James, reading my mind, or Richard, I don't know which one of you took over here. Exactly the point is that introduction of Copilot here. And even though I love the Viva search, like the search and learning, being able, you can actually filter by course content type, provider, even duration, which is one of my favorites. So if I have only 10 minutes to learn, I can search for a course and say, I want to find a video that's under 10 minutes or a course that should only take me under 10 minutes. But with Copilot, I don't even have to do that. So many less clicks. I just tell it what I want. And just like I can ask a person and they go check in their brain and they can feed that answer back to me, I can essentially do that with technology, right? And so I really cannot stress enough how much this is completely transforming and making it so much less daunting for people who now have to learn how to be learners in this space, because technology and the world and everything is shifting so fast. We're now giving you tools to be better learners and develop those skills on your own time in a comfortable way, without having to sort of translate to the language of the technology that's around you.
So let's pivot a little bit to the future of learning, because that's of course changing drastically as well. And how do we be successful with these? We've kind of hinted at our benefits. So what? Like, why are these features? Why are these changes important? Let's talk a little bit about how organizations are implementing this. So one of the big takeaways that we've mentioned a couple times now is this idea of an integrated employee experience, and how those employee experiences that we're talking about today are AI centric. That's the big transformative element, right? We had hybrid work and the digital transformation. It was accelerated by the pandemic. So that was digital first response. And now we have arguably a much harder challenge ahead of us, which is how do we help keep up our organizations with the transformation that AI is bringing, especially in the post-generative AI era. And so that means that we need to rethink our employee experience landscape, and learning is a big part of that transformation journey. And so another way to think about this, besides having good roadmaps and a good strategy around it, where we're understanding like the dependencies across those different experiences, is to also think about things like, how do you pilot a tool like this? And we've already highlighted, things like elective learning is a good metric to look on the back end. Things like understanding, the configuration itself of Viva Learning is pretty straightforward. But determining what are those learning paths, what are those academies, like thinking of the content strategy around learning, especially a content strategy that has more lowercase L learning instead of capital L learning, becomes a really important thing for the organization to wrap its heads around. What's more, we didn't really talk about it, and we kind of hinted at it, but this connection to active learning sources, so whether it's LinkedIn or even Microsoft's support material, right? Learning how to use the Office suite and things like that, those capabilities being built in where they're always up to date, always recommended with those sources. You can obviously pick and choose what you want to make enabled. That's a big benefit as well, right? So integrating, of course, like SAP SuccessFactors or other systems makes tons of sense to have a unified learning experience. But there's a lot to be said from just integrating everything from the Microsoft first-party options, as well as things like your SharePoint repositories. So you have a digital center of excellence. Let's bring that in, right, as both a learning academy, probably some learning pathways, and most importantly, a learning piece of content, a lowercase L learning piece of content could just be a presentation. You have a new sales hire. Think of how that onboarding journey changes if all of a sudden you can just assign them things like, here's the latest builds for product spec sheets and things like that we want you to be aware of, or here's the pitch deck for X. And I can assign that, even though it's not official, it's not part of like the traditional salesperson onboarding. It could be unique to your role, and having that freedom, both as a manager or as a peer, to be able to guide those learnings with learning objects, which are just really just SharePoint artifacts and things like that, or a document, can make a world of difference. So thinking about these timelines is important. These can be done really rapidly. You can do this, almost all of what we're describing, with obviously the free version, or you can do like a nice mix of free and premium capabilities that really enriches that. And I know I've commented on that on the side. It's also useful to understand the work breakdown. Like, what are the activities you need to do, right? So one of the things we also didn't really dive too deeply into is how this connects with your digital fitness and digital excellence initiatives. Every organization right now, after the pandemic and this hybrid shift, has been like first responders, but now we have to figure out how do we like sustain that, right? Because that, digital fitness is such a great term, because your digital skills, they constantly accumulate. You accumulate digital debt. So even if you don't use Outlook for everything, you're like, oh, I'm using Teams, I'm using this, I'm using newer, later technologies. The reality is that's totally dwarfed now by a change with Copilot and new ways of of working. So there's always some new stuff to learn. And for those high value linchpins, super collaborators, people that are really driving a lot of value in the organization through their contributions, the more that they can use these digital tools, the better. So an emphasis on digital excellence and learning is a great pathway to start maybe your pilot with something like Viva Learning. I wanted to highlight two more things, and then I'll come back up for air. One of the other ones is that sometimes we can get really sophisticated, and a scenario that's important to understand is how this connects with even non-Viva experiences. So I thought I'd use one example. In the Microsoft Teams experience, there's been this little repo, an example where you can have these champions. So, you want someone to be like an Excel champion or a Teams champion. You can give them a badge, which is literally changing their image so that it shows them in their profile image, which of course shows up everywhere. We've shown that, right? It's in the email, it's in Teams, it's everywhere where you see the person. And so you can actually have a badge, and that could be something like I'm a 2024 champion, or I'm a Excel expert, and I'm a new employee. Each of those types of badges creates different types of interactions. So if I see new employee, I might go, oh, this is a person I should reach out to and make their onboarding a little bit better, right? And that creates new facilitated opportunities for learning, right? Because if we've reached out because I'm like, hey, welcome to the team, I see that you're new because I see that little badge, then all of a sudden I might ask you like, what are you up to? What are you learning? What are you tackling? And I might be able to provide recommendations. And again, because I have these tools, it becomes easier to map it. So simple ideas like badging employees, which you can do using this solution that I'm recommending here, the code is there. Things like that can be really powerful techniques that can complement something like a Viva rollout. So, don't think of just, what is Microsoft giving me in Viva? What am I doing in SharePoint? What am I doing in X? Think of, again, more comprehensive strategies. And this brings up a great example. If you're doing a pilot for Viva Learning, what better time than now? You could do a Copilot, because that's a hard thing to deploy, and you could teach people essentially the transformative changes around Copilot using the Viva suite, including Viva Learning, right? So we can use like a little campaign where during the during the Copilot deployment, we can have people have centers of excellence in Viva Engage, communities and places that they can learn from together. We can have communication campaigns in Viva Amplify. We talked about those yesterday. We can also do things, of course, like create academies, right? So you saw that AI Academy, concepts of that nature. We can curate and create learning pathways. We can create a ton of material. In fact, Microsoft themselves are working on making this more accessible by providing recommended material as a starter point for a lot of organizations. And those capabilities will make it that much easier. Again, it's a technology Microsoft is leading, right? So Copilot is something, and AI at work is something that Microsoft's going to have a ton of material available that you could just kind of turn on and start to enable in your organization, and then complement it with your own unique framing. What is our AI responsibility, documents look like? What are our guidelines for that? That could be learning that you compare up with these sort of traditional Microsoft Copilot learning experiences. And so I think that that's another great example. If you're thinking about piloting, when's the right time to try Viva Learning, timing it along with a Copilot push within your organization, either the free or premium versions of Copilot, is a great opportunity as well. You don't have to just use Copilot in Viva Learning. You can use it as a broader organization to transform and improve, and you can use Viva Learning to support that. So really what we're saying here is that there's always ways to improve the experience. And right now there's such an acceleration of demand, right, for learning and development. And there's pressures from the industry. And if we don't have better tooling and techniques, we're really going to fall behind. So before I move into some questions and highlighting the next sessions, any additional comments from Jamie or James on this kind of planning next steps? I know there's Microsoft funding. I don't know if you guys can talk a little bit about that too, with standardized pilots and things like that.
I would say too. Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
Go. No, please, James.
I was going to say, I'll let you talk about the funding if you're getting to that, but I was just going to say too that we also have an adoption site that's adoption.microsoft.com that you can go through. And if you're looking at kind of adopting the Viva workloads or Copilot or really any aspect of the Microsoft 365 platform, we have a ton of adoption materials broken down by, end users, managers, IT professionals that kind of give you different aspects of the adoption process and materials that you can utilize to onboard your employees, get ready from an IT perspective and that type of thing. So I'll put the link in the chat, but it's definitely a great resource if you're not familiar with that already.
Yeah, and I we definitely have offerings around pilot options. Some of the specifics I don't have in front of me, unfortunately, but I am a member of the, most of the folks on here, your account teams. So for those of you who are aligned to any kind of managed account, please reach out to your account executive and we can absolutely align on sort of talking to you about options regarding that. But one thing that I did just want to call out to, and Richard, you made a point about this in terms of accessibility to sort of the core functions of the Viva platform. It's like what we call seeded content, right? But then when it comes to Copilot, that there are things that you can do already. Now, I just wanted to highlight that there's some of the great aspects of Copilot in Viva is the lack of necessity to do as much boundary
Yes.
tools, right? So it's like the sort of plug and play aspect and safety of being able to leverage Copilot in the Viva suite versus something like Copilot for Microsoft 365, where we tell a lot of people to, pump the brakes a little bit and take your time to put in, the right data and governance across your data estate in the cloud. When it comes to Copilot in Viva, this is really giving you just that generative AI capability right within the application without necessarily having the same sort of crawl effect across your data state, and it's really enabling you within the applications to leverage natural language and generative AI there. So you have that ability to start using it today without necessarily so much lead up and concern about some of those data conversations we have otherwise with some of our other copilots. So I just wanted to call that out there, that the accessibility and the kickstart of that is a much faster. But
Plus
I know we have a
one
little
for
bit of
sure.
time. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
because it's daunting when you do Copilot for Microsoft 365 because everyone has security debt, and
Right.
things like Viva Engage are meant to be more open. So using Copilot in scenarios like that is so much more accessible and easy to roll out compared to like Copilot for Microsoft 365. Same thing with learning, because so much learning is meant to be open. If you have access to learning object, it makes sense. So 100% echo that. I have a little IM question here. I think it's one of the best questions I've had in a long time. If you guys don't mind a little digression into it, and I'll highlight the other sessions too for reference. We had one yesterday, so I haven't updated the watch now, but if you do look on YouTube as well as on the website, there will be the session is actually fully uploaded from yesterday, and you'll see more information there, including the full deck. On tomorrow, we have a session on Viva Insights and Glint and Pulse. So indirect and direct signals from employees. And then lastly, on next Tuesday, we have one on goals and employee performance and management, which is changing a lot actually with AI. So lots to talk about there. But this is, I don't know, I'm just so excited. This is one of the most interesting questions I've ever gotten. So basically, the person, I won't name who because they wanted this to be confidential, is basically asking, in HR, which many people probably watching this are in, there's a lot of concern and anxiety around AI because we're both seeing two possible pathways in the future, divergent perspectives, right? One is as AI replaces and automates more and more work in the workforce and makes people more productive, do we reduce employee counts, which means employee experience, because normally it's based on the number of employees you have for spend, that's decreased, and is there concerns there? And then the other one, which is, is it going to, create more opportunity because you can see employees themselves, people are generating a lot of the value through collaboration with AI. And so is there a lot more opportunity for us to grow and expand there? So it's one of the most interesting questions I've had because it gets to the heart of the challenge. We're talking about employee development, and that is for some organizations and leaders not the highest priority versus things like in the bottom line. And so it kind of does get a bit of a deferral, based on investment years, like, oh, we need to invest in it now, but we've kind of deferred spending from periods to periods. So I just thought it was such a good question. I think it already frames some of it, right? Like optimistically, I think most of us are probably going to agree, collaboration with AI is the future. And so getting more out of your employees is actually going to be, because they're creative, they're capable, is going to be more and more important as AI changes the skilling landscape. But definitely an interesting one. Yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
No, I just wanted to touch on that because that concern around, hey, how generative AI is here. Am I going to be replaced or am I going to be empowered? Is basically like the situation that you kind of laid out already. And in fact, we've done a bit of research on this already. So if we haven't made it clear, Microsoft is research heavy, right? Everything we do is basically has been driven by research, the entire employee experience platform. But of course, all the other products that we're doing, it's like research first, product second, right? It's not like make something to make money, then validate it with research. So what I really love about that approach is that we've already been taking a lot of learns from what we've been doing with generative AI. And both across the ROI perspective, but also like the implication of AI. And we recently did a study, one of the many, through IDC, and they surveyed about, I think it was a little over 2,000 people, and started to ask like leaders as well, like, hey, what are leaders and employees, like, what are your thoughts and approaches to like your workforce and your strategies over the next few years with the introduction of generative AI? And a lot of the feedback was actually that things like cutting down the workforce was actually way less, like after they had taken time to evaluate it and started to leverage some of the tools, because about 71% of those companies were already using AI in their organizations who are part of the survey. So like a lot of their feedback was actually, no, we don't want to downsize. Our goal is actually, how can we better integrate this? Because they're seeing such a significantly positive outcome, and that the time that end users are getting back with utilizing generative AI or AI in general, right? Because you've seen some of the automated side of it plus the generative side of it today, is basically the time that it's getting them back is actually being fed back into what they're doing in their workday, right? So they feel like, I feel better when I'm at work because I'm able to tackle what I need to get done and I'm able to move on. And I'm also more creative because these tools are allowing me to sort of get that first draft or do something I've never done before, because I basically have an assistant or an influence of this huge database that I can basically talk to, or I shouldn't call it a database, but let's say like this tool that can interpret what I'm looking for and help me get there if I never knew how to get there before, and faster than ever before. So it's actually, while people's concerns are valid, and it's a conversation I'm having often around what are we going to do now that generative AI is here, now that AI is here kind of in so many forms, such a heavy presence. Is this something that's daunting, or is this something that is actually going to help us? And what it's looking like is that while we still always have to be aware, and that's sort of our goal is to have that responsible AI approach and an ethical approach, it's part of imbuing those tools or those ethics and principles into our workforce by giving them the right, like I said, cultural understanding, being aligned with companies like Microsoft and the research we're doing. We have councils for AI responsibility and ethics, right? So that's the important piece. And more so, more AI in your organization is actually turning out to be a lot more effective, right? So better work-life balance, et cetera.
Great set of points. And, at the end of the day, we know the more informed we are, the better. So hopefully this was helpful for all of you. I know another big thing here is that, those who are championing learning are thinking longer term. You're not often thinking of like, what do I do this year for learning? You're thinking, how do I build and scaffold something that's going to sustain? And so champion that, right? Champion the idea that the whole marketplace is going to increase in competitiveness. So if you take short-term things and reduce headcount, you're probably going to put yourself in a worse position than re-onboarding, retraining, and reskilling, which puts emphasis on all the things we talked about today. If you're looking for more guidance on this, we have a 100+ page white paper on Viva, Copilot, and a lot of the journey that we talked about at the very beginning. Thanks so much.